It was originally a Ford, as all Shelbys were.
There was right around 100 modifications that Shelby did to a Ford Mustang to make the GT350.
Rick Harrison, the face of the show Pawn Stars, keeps both these things in mind. His keen eye and understanding of the market have earned him items that are considered treasures by collectors. Sometimes it's an old ball and chain, sometimes the best luxury cars. Rick has a long list of things that prove his intelligence. He once bought a piece of jewelry that was studded with American gold coins and studded with as many diamonds as possible. It was a great example of classic 70s bling. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some of Rick Harrison's most interesting and memorable deals. If you like such interesting collections and fun deal stories, then do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you can be the first to get every new video update. When you're shopping for antiques, sometimes you come across something that's not only surprising, but also a direct link to history. One day, a man walks into the Pawn Stars shop, and in his hands is a real ball and chain. This is no ordinary thing. In the old days, the police or prison authorities used it to keep prisoners under control. These prisoners were often put to work, like working in the fields or cleaning railway lines, and were tied to this heavy iron chain so that they could not escape. When Rick Harrison saw the chain, he immediately knew it was no ordinary item. But still, as usual, he called an expert to check its authenticity first. A real ball and chain is extremely difficult to find today because most of the things circulating in the market are fake. The chain that came to the shop was from Yuma Prison, which was built in the 1870s, before Arizona was even a state. What's great about real chains is that they were made by hand. Each link was heated and hammered together, old-fashioned, laborious work. Rick understands the importance of this piece of history. Such an item can fetch up to $750 on the market, so he seems pretty excited. Funnily enough, the man who came to sell it joked, "I just got married. I don't want this chain anymore." 19th century strongbox. Wells Fargo Rick Harrison gets that signature smile every time he picks up a rare antique, because he knows he's getting something special. Not only is Rick a knowledgeable shopper, he's also been a collector of historical police items for the past 25 years. So when he comes across a genuine ball and chain, he knows its weight and significance. His expert inspection determines it's real and could be worth between $650 and $750. Rick, showing his smarts, buys it for $400, and the deal brings a satisfied smile to his face. A little while later, another rare item comes along, a G.I. Joe nurse action figure. If you grew up in the 60s, G.I. Joe is no stranger to the name. But even Rick is surprised to learn that the 1967 version of the nurse is probably the only doll left. G.I. Joe is often associated with combat, so this nurse version is extremely unique and rare. The woman selling it says she bought it at an estate sale. Rick calls in an expert again, who confirms it's authentic and from the 60s. The doll also comes with a medic bag, which is white in color. Experts say this variant was made in very limited quantities, which adds to the price. The bag alone can go for $250, and the entire doll can be worth $1,500 to $2,000. Rick knows he's on to something rare, but he keeps his cool and composed so the buyer doesn't jack up the price. The true value of antiques is realized when there is a story attached to them, and if that story is related to history, then its value increases manifold. One day a man comes to Rick Harrison and tells him that he has an original letter written by Winston Churchill. Such claims often turn out to be false, so Rick is cautious. He immediately calls an expert, who thoroughly examines the letter's paper quality, typing spacing and signature. The paper has a British watermark, and it appears to be part of Churchill's personal stationery. The expert also tells that the typing style matches that of a typewriter of that era, and the signature is handwritten with Churchill's original pen, not an automatic machine. After matching all the information, it is confirmed that this letter is an original document written by Winston Churchill in 1950. Its potential market value can be between $1,800 and $2,000. However, the man who came to sell it agrees to make the deal for $800. This turns out to be Rick's biggest deal of the day, not just financially, but also because of adding a piece of history to his collection. As important as the matches played on the field are in the world of sports, so are the memorabilia associated with the names of the players. Sports memorabilia, jerseys, balls, or seats, often sells for thousands of dollars. Rick Harrison is going to an auction one day, and he notices a man selling 2 seats from Texas Stadium. The special thing was that these seats had autographs of Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman, and these 3 are considered to be some of the biggest names in the NFL. Rick immediately knows that this is no ordinary thing. One of these seats also has a personal hologram stamp of Joe Montana. However, there was a problem. There was no certificate of authenticity with Emmitt Smith's autograph. Montana's hologram was there, but this was at a time when authentication systems like Prova were not in place. Emmitt Smith is considered one of the best running backs of all time, and Rick knows that his signature can multiply the value of any item. So Rick shells out $2,000 to buy one of the seats, while the seller wanted $3,000 for both. Rick later meets Emmitt Smith in person to make sure the autograph is authentic. Smith notices that the seat has a Prova sticker and his signature on it, even though there are no official papers. Antique firearms have an allure not just because of their design or age, but also because of their story. One day, Rick Harrison's old friend walks into his shop with a .40 caliber pepperbox handgun from the 1800s. He says he bought it at an estate sale, but won't tell Rick how much he paid. Now he wants at least $1,800 for it. Rick has a habit of testing things out himself, especially when it comes to antiques. The two decide to take it to the shooting range to test its performance. When Rick tests it out on the range, he says, "I tried the percussion caps, and everything worked fine, so I'm comfortable shooting it." This time Rick goes against the grain. Even though the value of vintage firearms goes up if they're unfired, he's determined to test the gun to see if it actually works. Rick fires it by aiming it at a pint glass of English lager, and finds the idea interesting. After firing, all parts of the weapon were working properly. Rick estimates its value at around $3,000. Now that he knew the gun was real and in working order, his friend's $1,800 asking price seemed reasonable. The two strike a deal. There are some things in history that look unique at first glance, but in reality, their significance is very deep. Rick Harrison once found a very strange and rare thing: Sharp's coffee grinder carbine. This is not an ordinary gun, but a rifle from the Civil War era, with a coffee grinder attached to its rear part, i.e., the butt. Rick had heard about such weapons before, but he had never seen such a model with his own eyes. It is believed that the purpose of such a rifle was not only to grind coffee, but also to help grind grains like corn and wheat. That is, it was also a kind of field tool. The story behind this is even more interesting. In the 1920s, a commander of the Springfield Arsenal, along with his staff, presented the idea of making a carbine that also had a grinder. This model was prepared based on this idea. According to Rick, Till now, it has been believed that only one original unit of this kind exists, and that, too, is kept in a museum. So when a man comes into Rick's shop with this weapon, Rick knows the occasion is special. He might be about to uncover a forgotten chapter of history. Throwing caution, Rick calls in an expert who examines the weapon. It turns out it's authentic and made from original parts from the 1920s. It could be worth more than $70,000. The seller initially asks for $10,000, but Rick settles for $35,000 because of its uniqueness and history. He's sure such a rare and unique piece will earn him a handsome profit in the long run. And yes, after the pepper box deal, when Rick asks his friend how much he bought it for, he smiles. Only $500? Rick laughingly agrees to pay $1,800. But with the condition that the profit will be paid for with lunch at your expense. A real collector is one who can find treasure in the trash. One day, a man comes into Rick Harrison's shop with an old 19th century coffee grinder. He says it was given to him by his uncle, who works for the sanitation department, and often finds interesting things in the trash. The grinder looks sturdy and heavy, but it's covered in several coats of old paint. The seller did some minor cleaning himself. He says it had to be sandblasted because it had about 30 coats of paint on it, mostly house paint. Rick has a feeling the item is real. Chicago was known for manufacturing steel and cast iron products in the second half of the 19th century, and items from that era can fetch good prices in today's market. The seller asks for $500, but Rick tells him it would cost $300 to $400 to restore it. After some negotiation, the two settle for $200. Rick then takes it to his trusted craftsman, who specializes in restoring old things to new life. Cleaning and painting the grinder takes a lot of effort. Every part has to be taken apart and properly polished and painted. In the end, Rick ends up with a stunning and visually appealing antique coffee grinder. He spent $350 on the restoration, but he is confident the piece could sell for up to $2,500 on the market, making the deal a great investment for him. Sometimes it happens that the size of something is small, but its value and importance turns out to be much greater than expected. One day, a man comes to Rick Harrison's shop, bringing with him a small go-kart and some storage boxes. When he opens the box, Rick's eyes widen. In front of him was a magnificent collection of Matchbox cars from 1953 to 1969. Matchbox cars started in the late 1940s. These small cars were very popular in that era due to their details, moving wheels and opening doors. They had no major competitor until 1968, until Hot Wheels entered the market. These cars were considered miniature copies of real cars, and today they are no less than a treasure for collectors. Most of the cars in this collection were in mint condition, that is, almost like new. There were some that had never been taken out of the box till date. When Rick saw that the seller had more than 1,000 units, about 600 of which were still in boxes, he knew this was no ordinary deal. The seller knew the value of his collection and wouldn't negotiate for less than $20,000. He says he started collecting cars when he was a child and has kept every single model well. The Matchbox Company modified its models in the 1970s to compete with Hot Wheels, and that modification increased the value of older models even more. For example, the Coronation Coach, which was only made in a few hundred units, can be worth $1,200 to $1,500 today. Or the BP Tanker with gray wheels, which is valued at around $1,000. To Rick, the entire collection was like a mini garage, small but extremely valuable vehicles to keep on every desk. Rick Harrison never forgets to consult an expert before making a high-priced deal. That's exactly what he did when he came across a rare collection of Matchbox cars from 1953 to 1969. The expert carefully inspected each model and confirmed that all of them were authentic pre-1970 collectibles. The total value of the collection was estimated at $75,000 in the current market, meaning the collection was a true treasure. With that information, Rick sealed the deal. Now, let's talk about another rare find. Things that have been treasured for generations have a different value. A man named Jeff was rummaging through his grandmother's old things in his home when he found a special medal, which he brought to Hardcore Pawn. The medal was believed to be linked to the famous 18th century sea captain, Captain James Cook. Captain Cook is a name known in history for sea exploration and travel. The coin or medal was an old design and looked like it had once been hung from a ribbon, perhaps used for some ceremony or honor. Similarly, another item that came into the shop was a ticket stub from the 1988 Olympics, signed by both Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. Rick instantly recognized the signatures. These two were the biggest names in heavyweight boxing at the time. Getting these autographs on the same ticket was a big deal. When Rick asked, "So, what do you want to do with it?" the owner smiled and said, "I've had it for a long time. I'm thinking of selling it now." Sometimes an old object may look ordinary, but the history and significance behind it makes it extremely valuable. Rick Harrison once had a man named Jeff come to him with an old coin. The coin looked special. It had an image of King George III on one side and a picture of the HMS Resolution on the other. Rick immediately realized that this was no ordinary coin. The HMS Resolution was the ship from which Captain James Cook made his historic sea voyages. Captain Cook's voyages to Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Ocean were made on this ship, and this makes the coin's historical significance enormous. Rick didn't rush and called in a coin expert to estimate its real value. The expert's eyes lit up as soon as he saw the coin. He told him that it was not only used as legal tender, but it was also given to local leaders and chieftains as a symbol of goodwill from the British Empire. To everyone's surprise, the expert estimated its value to be around $8,500. Rick realized that this was an opportunity he couldn't let go of. Jeff had thought he would get $50, but Rick offered him $5,000. And Jeff happily accepted the deal. Do you think that was a fair offer? Let us know in the comments below. Sometimes valuable things come to you in the most unexpected ways. One day, a young man named Ron walks into Rick Harrison's shop with a painting in his hand. It was no ordinary painting. It was by Jim Daly, a renowned American artist whose work is highly respected in the fields of post-war and contemporary art. Ron told Rick that he got the painting from his father, a mover by trade. A customer had given him the painting as a tip after he was impressed with his good work. Rick was shocked. That was a tip? Because Daly's original paintings can fetch a considerable price in the art market today. Ron wanted to raise some capital from the deal because he was planning to start his own business. He hoped that if all went well, he could get up to $13,000 for the painting. Rick himself was impressed by the painting, but he clearly states that the real value will be created only if it turns out to be an original painting and not a print. That is, the difference between being real or fake was going to determine the outcome of the deal. Experience is the best tool in recognizing the authenticity of a work of art. When Ron told Rick that he expected Jim Daly's painting to fetch him up to $13,000, Rick took no chances and called his friend and art expert Brett. Brett examined it carefully and said clearly, "This is not a print. It is a real painting. Not only this, He quoted its price between $10,000 to $15,000. Rick initially offered Ron $6,000, to which Ron got a little disappointed and said, "Oh, man, a little more?" But after some negotiation, both of them finalized the deal for $6,500. Ron not only got a good price, but now the capital was also ready to start his business. Now let's talk about a story that touches the heart. A family, which was going through financial crisis, was trying to get relief by selling some of its most valuable things. He had 2 Gretsch brand electric guitars that he had inherited from a relative. It wasn't easy for him to sell them, but he was satisfied that he got $1,800, which is what Seth offered. But the story doesn't end there. Seth later learns that the actual value of the guitars is much higher. Instead of keeping all the profits, he calls the family back and decides to return the extra $1,000 to them. This honest and sensitive decision not only earned him respect, but also brought some relief to the family. Now, let's shift our attention to a unique artifact. For collectors of archaeological objects, some objects are so unique that just seeing them becomes an experience. One day a woman named Diana brought a huge object to Rick Harrison's shop, and it was no ordinary object, but an elephant bird's egg. The elephant bird, which is now extinct, was considered one of the largest birds in the world. Its eggs were equally large and rare. Diana said that she had kept this egg with her for the last 10 years, and now wanted someone else to enjoy this historical object. Rick had an idea that this egg could be real, but he was also suspicious, because there are many fake eggs in the market. Some people even make fake eggs using things like porcelain. So Rick called a paleontologist, who was an expert in identifying real and fake. After examination, the expert confirmed that this egg was indeed real, and once there must have been a baby elephant bird in it. He also said that such eggs can fetch up to $5,900 in the market. Diana initially thought the egg would be worth around $2,500. Keeping this in mind, Rick offered $2,800. He made it clear that he would not pay more than that. After a little conversation, Diana happily accepted the offer. And now she wants to use the money to add more rare items to her collection. Sometimes things don't fall from the ground, but from the sky, and they're worth a hefty price. One day a man walked into Rick Harrison's shop with a meteorite he valued at nearly $5,000. The shop doesn't usually deal in such stones, but if it really was an ancient meteorite, it could be a very valuable find. Rick immediately called in an expert who, after examining it, confirmed that the stone was old enough to be worth about $4,000. Upon learning this, the shop offered $1,800. Although the owner expected a little more, after some negotiation the deal was finalized at $2,100, and he walked away with a tidy profit on his fallen-from-the-sky stone. Now let's move on to another, more emotional story. Davy, who was struggling financially, came into the shop looking to sell a gemstone that was inherited from his family. It was a kunzite, a rare and precious gemstone that Davy valued at $15,000. He intended to use the money to buy his way out of his financial problems. Rick thought the stone looked amazing, but he wanted to be sure it was real. Davy joked that he felt bad that Rick didn't trust him, but wanted to find out for himself what the expert's opinion was. The gemologist soon confirmed that it was natural kunzite, and that its market value was about $9,600. But Davy still insisted on $15,000, while Rick offered $5,000. After a long conversation, the two settled for $6,500. As Davy left, he said, "I probably wouldn't have gone anywhere else, just to put up with all the fuss." Sometimes the most memorable things happen when you're just a spectator. and life rewards you more than the field. During the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, a sports fan named Bill went to watch the bouts. But little did he know he'd meet two future heavyweight boxing champions that day. That same year, 18-year-old Mike Tyson was part of the Olympic team, but he wasn't selected for the main bouts. The team got a bye in one bout, so the whole gang headed out to explore Los Angeles. Tyson, who was a bit of a recluse at the time, looked disappointed. When Bill saw the young boxer, he didn't just acknowledge him, he invited him to lunch. It was a small but powerful move. During that meeting, Bill got Mike to sign a simple ticket stub, not knowing that one day this young boy would be called Iron Mike Tyson and make it into the Boxing Hall of Fame. The luck didn't stop there. Evander Holyfield was also at the restaurant. Bill got him to sign the same ticket stub. That's two great boxers' autographs on one ticket. Now, years later, Bill has this memorable ticket stub, and he thinks it must be worth at least $500. But before jumping to conclusions, he decided it would be better to ask an expert for advice. Historical items are not just valuable in their age, but in the memories they bring. When Steve saw a 1984 Olympics ticket stub brought in by Bill, featuring Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield's autographs, he immediately confirmed that both signatures were authentic. Steve then valued the ticket at around $2,000, a spectacular price that Bill probably didn't expect. Rick's son, Corey, initially offered Bill $1,000, but Bill wasn't willing to accept it. And frankly, no one else would have agreed that quickly. Bill made it clear he wanted at least $1,500. And Steve also backed up the fact that the item was the ultimate collectible from that year's Olympics. The two sides didn't make a deal, but the conversation was respectful throughout. Bill was confident he could get a better price, and when you've treasured something for 40 years, there's no harm in waiting a little longer. Corey took it in a sporting spirit and said that if Bill changed his mind about the deal in the future, he could always come back. The two shook hands and parted ways. Maybe the deal would work out next time. Now on to the last and perhaps the most interesting item on our list, a button, which may seem small but has a big story to tell. A man, a bookkeeper by profession, brings an old jewelry box to Rick's shop. It contained several buttons and pieces of jewelry that looked very old and regal. He claimed that the box once belonged to Marie Antoinette, the French queen who was executed during the Revolution. She said that the box had come into her possession through a deal in the course of her profession, and that it bore the same family name that Marie Antoinette had received upon her marriage to King Louis XVI. When it comes to old royal jewelry, not all that glitters is gold. And Rick Harrison knew that well. When a man brought an old button and jewelry box into Rick's shop, he claimed the items had once belonged to Marie Antoinette. The buttons in the box certainly looked special. Rick recognized them as paste diamonds, stones that look like real diamonds and were sometimes worn by royalty. Rick recognized that they were rare and valuable, but he wasn't sure they really belonged to Marie Antoinette. The biggest suspicion arose when Rick noticed that the gold necklace chain below the crest was not from the era, but had been made after the Queen's death. That meant the entire set couldn't have belonged to Marie Antoinette. Regardless, the items had historical and artistic value. The seller initially asked for $10,000, but Rick made it clear he wasn't going to pay that much. After negotiations, the deal was settled at $3,500, a fair price in that situation. From rare Captain Cook medals to jewelry belonging to Marie Antoinette, these are the unique treasures discovered on Hardcore Pawn.